I have a different filming thing because I was using, whatever, it's not important. Hello. Today I want to talk about the books that I read so far in 2026, or I guess Q1, because I have finished 2 books since Q1 ended, but I'm only going to talk about the ones that I read in quarter 1. January. So this was actually the first day of the year. January 1st, I read A Psalm for the Wild Built, which is by Becky Chambers. I wanted to start off the year with something cute and sweet, and this had a nice cover, which is kind of important because I don't know if you knew this, but on Storygraph, whatever your first book that you finish in the year becomes like a pretty prominent feature of your reading wrap-up graphic for the end of the year. So I had that fresh in my mind and I said, let me read this cute little artsy book. It was short and sweet. It was like hopeful sci-fi, which is great because I feel like sci-fi can be so doom and gloom and just depressing. But this is like a hopeful future where humans have like figured out how to live in harmony with nature, and there are robots, but they kind of live separate from the humans. I believe the robots used to work for the humans. Whatever. It's cute. I like this book. There's more books in this series. I think I would like to read those. I haven't given it a rating yet, but I'm thinking like a 3.75, or like a 3.5. Usually with my ratings, I rank them in relation to other books that I've read. So like, is this giving me the same energy as books that I have rated a 3? Like, did I enjoy it more? Did I enjoy it less? And I'm considering the genre in that rating. So if it's set out to be a children's book and it does it really well, that's going to get 5 stars, just as some more complex literary work might get 5 stars for the craftsmanship of the work and the overall structure, etc. So I want to read the next book. And yeah, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, maybe this is a 4, honestly, because like it did what it said it was going to do. So I feel like that's all you can ask for. The next book was Circe. I'm going to say Circe because I don't actually know how you're supposed to say Circe, by Madeline Miller, which is a Greek mythology feminist retelling situation. This was for book club. It was my pick. I had this and Song of Achilles on my list. And at some point in my research of Madeline Miller, the author, I knew that Song of Achilles was one she wrote first, and thus it was higher on my priority of what to read. But then when it came time to suggest books for book club, I forgot that. And so I suggested Circe, which is her more recent book out of the 2. I don't know why. I guess it also doesn't really matter because it's not like there's spoilers. She's like pretty faithful to the Greek myths, which was kind of crazy reading because there were some things that were details and I'm like, is that a real thing in Greek mythology, or did Madeline Miller make that up? And like 9 times out of 10, it was a real thing that happened in Greek mythology. The lore is so extensive. It's crazy. That being said, you don't know the lore. You're not familiar, you've heard a little bit of it, but overall you don't really know what's going on. That's also fine. Honestly, I think it kind of makes some of the twists more exciting. Like if you don't know which characters are supposed to die when. Circe is an immortal person and there are mortals in the book, so there are people who die. Yeah, I think overall I would say going in blind is fine. You'll probably remember some of the myths from growing up, or I don't know if anyone else had a phase where they got into Greek mythology. I know for me, when Percy Jackson, those books were happening in middle school, I kind of got a little into whatever myths were being told in Percy Jackson. There were some people in book club who had more knowledge than I did about the topic, and they were pretty much saying, yeah, this is like pretty historically accurate. I mean, it's mythology, so what can we really say is historically accurate, but like as the record we have of the tales as they have been told and passed through time, this was very faithful. It felt a little constrained to me. I haven't given it a rating yet. I'm thinking like 4.5, 4.25, because it is kind of like you're dealing with the confines of the source material. It did what it set out to do, and it was enjoyable. But yeah, I would rate it similarly to books in that range, like a 4, 4.25. Yeah, I'm glad that people in my book club liked it though, because that's always a really good ego boost when people like the book you choose for book club. The next book that I read because of the state of the world was How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them by Jason Stanley. I have a Kobo, and Kobo will have like daily deals and sales, and anytime there's like a cheap book, I can be easily convinced to part ways with money. Not like super easily, but like I'll look up the books that are on sale, and if they are something that I would be interested in reading, I'll add them to my Storygraph, TBR, and then also maybe make a purchase. Sometimes I forget to make the purchase, which is actually good because it saves me money. I think in this case, this was something I saw was on sale. I think I also got it confused because I had seen someone else on BookTube recommending On Tyranny, which I don't think is by this author. It might actually be like an old-timey book that is like philosophy. These two books look very similar, like the layout of both of them looks similar in my memory. I mean, I'll try to put them on the screen so you can look and be the judge, but I think I got them confused, and when I was looking at How Fascism Works, I was like, oh, that's that book that guy on BookTube said I should read. Turns out it was not the book, but it was still good. I gave it 5 stars. I said it was very accessible. I track my reading on Storygraph, and I'll input notes for the different chunks that I read. At one point, one of my notes said that I feel like my brain software is downloading a new update, because there's this concept that he talks about of unreality, and establishing unreality in the everyday is kind of a really big part of fascist ideology and how it kind of takes root, introducing these seeds of doubt that make people very distrustful of their own eyes. I think there's like that Orwell quote that everybody talks about. It's like, the party tells you not to believe your own eyes, or whatever, like not trust what you see or hear. It's such a difficult concept to wrap your brain around, because like when you hear, okay, unreality, seeds of doubt, yes, I think I understand what that means, but like when you really think about it, it's like a paradox. Is that like you're establishing unreality as what is true, which kind of fundamentally changes what the concept of truth is. So then like, how do we know what is true? I kind of wrote also that it's kind of an important part of people being able to gain power. It's like a stun attack of confusion. Like while we're all confused and trying to put together the pieces of what's happening, people are making moves in the shadows or in the background to consolidate their power. So I'm editing this video, and I'm about to go on a tangent about buying Kobo ebooks versus reading the books on Libby in terms of what each option offers you for your annotations, your notes, your highlights. I thought this was relevant as I was talking. As I'm editing, no idea, but hey, maybe this is helpful to someone, so I'll leave it in. Okay, bye. What I like about Kobo is when you have Kobo books you purchase, anything you annotate on your e-reader, once it syncs up to the cloud, you can then access those notes on your phone or on their web app, because I paid for this. This is like my digital copy of this. Whereas I noticed with Libby books, any annotations you take get deleted once that copy is deleted from your e-reader. I know in Libby, if you annotate things in their mobile app, the highlights will stay for the next time you download that book. But for some reason, that doesn't transfer to the Kobo experience of Libby books, which is kind of disappointing. And it's made me more inclined to try and buy e-books, which I guess is good for Kobo, but if I had one complaint about the Libby books on Kobo, it would be that. This is also a short book. I think the e-reader copy says that it's only 186 pages, so it didn't take super long to get through. I highlighted all kinds of things from the introduction. Yeah, like there's so many highlights. There's the chapters, I think, give a really good overview of everything as well. The chapters are Chapter 1, The Mythic Past, Chapter 2, Propaganda, Chapter 3, Anti-Intellectual, Chapter 4, Unreality. That's the chapter that really went into the concept of unreality I was talking about before. Chapter 5 is Hierarchy, Chapter 6, Victimhood, Chapter 7, Law and Order, Chapter 8, Sexual Anxiety, Chapter 9, Sodom and Gomorrah, Chapter 10, Arbeit Mac Frey. I assume that's German, and I know I didn't say that correctly. And then there's an epilogue. I would recommend this book. I think my Storygraph review was that I was resisting the urge to passive-aggressively send a link to the book to people in my life. Instead of being passive-aggressive, I'm going to recommend it to people who are interested in learning about the topic. But yeah, 5 stars. Even if you don't like nonfiction, I think it's kind of important, so I would recommend. The next book, The Ill-Made Mute by Cecilia Dart-Thornton. This was a gift from a book club friend. I actually got this for our Christmas party, and the book itself is like so pretty. I don't know, I have the copy somewhere, but I don't really want to get up and get it. So hopefully there will be the picture of the cover. It's so pretty. The person who made the illustrations for these like special edition paperback releases also makes album artwork for like heavy metal artists, which I think is super cool. My brother is like super into metal music and he exclusively wears band t-shirts and he always has some really cool designs. So it's cool to have that kind of art style or an artist who works in that art style interpreting a fantasy novel. There are those romantasy books where it's just kind of like ambiguous silhouettes and dark colors and the big bright font of the title, and then there's like a sword or something, which like sure, but I really like this kind of landscape. I don't know, there's something so vintage and like nostalgic about it. It is a very long book though. If I had it, I would show you. It's like this thick, like it, I want to say it's comparable to like a Bible you would carry around, and like imagine hitting someone on the head with that. Yeah, it would hurt. The fact that I owned it in paperback was kind of difficult because I wanted to bring it places to read, but then I didn't want to damage this beautiful new book that I got. So I wound up getting also an ebook copy from my library, and that was great because I could then also look up words, just like a general overview of The Ill-Made Mute. It is inspired by Celtic folklore and myths, and it's about this creature, humanoid creature, human, question mark, who wakes up with no memory and is unable to speak and is kind of finding out about the world that they've woken up in, and we are following them through that journey. It really wasn't what I expected it to be. I was expecting it to be contained like in the place where this creature wakes up, which is this kind of like castle tower vibe, but like after the first chapter, they wound up going on adventures that are outside the confines of the castle. So we really do get to explore this world. There's a lot of folklore, and the reason why the e-reader was so good was that there was a made-up language by Cecilia Dart-Thornton, but then there were also references to things that I was assuming were from Celtic mythology or Celtic words, or just things that I was unfamiliar with that it was nice to be able to highlight and search using the dictionary or just connected to the internet. And also, the e-reader is so much lighter than a chunky paperback that would probably give someone a concussion. The writing was also a bit long-winded, chunky, clunky, some weird pacing. Like, there would be really big time jumps, and the only thing demarcating it was like the start of a new paragraph. There wasn't like ellipses, or you know how sometimes there'll be like 2 dots or like some kind of design in the book that indicates we're jumping from one part to the next part. I personally find those kinds of things really helpful. It also tended to get really laser focused on the details of the world that we were experiencing. Like, one of the foundational things in this world is there is a element. I can't remember the name of it now because it's been like 2 months since I read this, but there's an element that is basically kind of like a magnet, but it propels itself away from the earth. So using this magnetized sort of material, you can float and fly. So the people in this world have used that to be able to have flying ships and flying horses even. Like, they have horseshoes that they put on the horses. So the horses can kind of like fly through the air without wings, which is pretty cool. We are on one of these airships at some point, and it gets so in the weeds with boat terminology. And I don't think I would have minded that as much if that was not immediately discarded. Like, we don't go back on one of those airships for the rest of the book. They honestly don't even really play a big part in what happens in the rest of the book. So I don't know if this was being introduced for future books in the series. Honestly, I'm going to be really disappointed if in the second and third books it doesn't come up at all, because then it's like, why did we even learn all this stuff? And yeah, it was kind of slow at points to get through. I think I was also feeling that because the friend who gave this book was moving. The next coming meeting was going to be the last time I'd be able to meet with her and talk about the book. So I really felt the pressure to really get through this book so I could thank her for it and tell her what I thought about it. I do want to read the next parts of the series. It's just very, very wordy and detailed. There was someone on the cover or on the back of the book, a pull quote of an author who compared this writer to Tolkien, which I haven't read Tolkien yet. I know. That friend who was moving gave me her first book of The Lord of the Rings. So I am going to read it at some point. So I don't know if Tolkien was also this wordy. I think I seem to remember hearing he is kind of wordy. Detailed. Good story. It was interesting to see all the mythology come into play. I think it did kind of suffer from an author who knew so much about the world that they were just like so eager to share all of the knowledge that they had. And I think that kind of took away from the pacing of the story at some points. But I still am intrigued. I was reading this, it was so slow. And then in like the last 3/4 of the book, a handsome young man appears. And the way my attention just immediately, eyes snapped open. I was locked in. I was like, I need to know what happens with this handsome man. And I think that's really indicative of why romantasy is popular. Anyway, the next book that I read was for book club. It was Service by Sarah Gilmartin. I gave this 5 stars. It was so good. Ida from book club picked this. I tend to like books that Ida picks, so shouts out. I don't think I would have picked it up because of the content. It's about a man who is on trial for sexual assault. He is a famous chef in Dublin, and it's kind of about the culture of his restaurant. We're also following his wife in the present day, and then a girl who used to work at the restaurant, Hannah. So we have Hannah, Julie, who's his wife, and then his name, Daniel. But I'm really glad that we had this because I had a very profound experience of reading the perspective of a very unlikable character and really coming to coming to see that the way this character operates in the world is just so fundamentally different from me and from, I think, a lot of people. But I was really impressed by the characters in this book. They were all so three-dimensional, like they almost felt four-dimensional, you know? I'm really impressed by how transformed I felt by the experience of having read this book. The pacing of it was excellent. I can't really find flaw with much of anything in the book. The imagery was excellent. As I said, the characters, there's the one really big unlikable character. There are also minor male characters that are also unlikable. But then we also have all of these women, a wide variety of women. It was like a great book club discussion. We have the male children of this horrific abuser. I think there's something that is very profound from having to sit with the perspective of this man. It was very illuminating. That's the word that I kept coming back to. It's just, oh, like, it's one thing to know that this type of person exists, but to really make yourself sit through and sit with this type of thinking for an extended period of time, as when you're reading from, in part, their perspective, it feels like an embodied understanding rather than just like an intellectual one. So I would really, really recommend this book. I know the topic is not great, but I think you're not left down in the dumps when the book ends. You know, like, obviously the topic is very serious, but it takes care of the reader in how it ends. I would really recommend this, Sarah Gilmartin. I want to read more from her. She seems awesome. Okay. Oh my gosh, it's 12 a.m. I need to take a shower. But we're halfway through. YN by Esther Yi. I was so sad because the cover of this book is so pretty. And I really wanted to like this because it's about like a delusional K-pop stan, which we were all teenagers on Tumblr. Like, I get it, girly. I wasn't sure of the star rating at the time I wrote these notes. I think last night I went in and I gave it a 1.5, which is the lowest I've ever rated a book. There's one other book that I rated 1.5 stars last year. I said in my notes that it's not as bad as the book that made me think we should defund the arts, but it was closer than I'd like it to be. And then I did wind up giving it the same rating as that book. So 1.5 stars, not a great rating from me. Frankie from Frankie's Shelf read this book, and I think their analysis of it was very spot on. They recapped the book if you're interested. I think it was some video about reading books about unhinged women. Because yeah, it is an unhinged woman. But Frankie's review on Storygraph was imagining what this could have been and biting the walls. And yeah, because it's such an interesting premise. But then I said in my review that it was overwritten and certain of itself in a way that I can only hope makes sense to the author, because it really didn't make sense to me. Also in my review, I compared it to kind of like watching a really on the nose or like confusing piece of performance art where you can like tell it means a lot to the people performing it, but you're just kind of like, what the fuck is this? The example I came up with was it's like you're watching performance art where the performance artist at some point has a bunch of balloons and then they start like hitting people with the balloons and it's like totally deadpan, and like that's like the only part you remember from the performance, even though there was like other stuff happening. You're just like, oh yeah, that was the performance art with like the balloon. Yeah, I don't think you have to read this book. It really wasn't that good. Like, I don't know, because the main character is the writer. So is this type of writing supposed to be indicative of what the main character is like when they write? But then it's like, well, this is just a bad experience. Whatever you want to accomplish with this text is getting lost in the delivery. It also felt like it was maybe a short story that then had to get fleshed out on a deadline. I feel like it would have been stronger with a lot of things cut out, maybe even just if it started at the point where the main character finally makes it to the entertainment company this K-pop idol used to work at, trying to find him once he disappears. I feel like if you had started the story there, that would have been good, but then there's like all this stuff that happens before that it was just kind of like, what are we doing? If you're interested in it, I would recommend watching Frankie's video. Skip some stuff, but it's not super important. And yeah, there's so many books to read, so I wouldn't recommend. It felt like it was from a writer who has trouble incorporating feedback or like didn't get any feedback. Yeah, I'm confused what award it won because I think it did win some award. I'm like, what award? Okay, the last two. I think this is the second book I started. It took me 3 months to finish this. It is Frederick Douglass, Prophet of Freedom, which is a 37-hour audiobook. You heard me right, 37 hours. I was listening to it on like 1.15 or like 1.2 speed, just because if it's too slow, my mind starts wandering. And I think my Libby, once I finished the book, said that I spent a total of 24 hours with this book. I listened to a full day of this book over the course of 3 months. It is so long, but it was so good. Like, this is on the list of Time's 100 books of the best books of the 21st century. And yeah, I get it. Because even though it's a history book, it's like weirdly cinematic. And I just kept thinking like this needs to be optioned for like a TV show, like a prestige TV. I would watch this. And I didn't really learn anything about Frederick Douglass in high school or at any point in my life. So I really was going in blind. He has such a fascinating life. There's so much out there on him because he did write 3 autobiographies, and we have letters that he sent to various contemporaries. His children also made some efforts to preserve documents related to their family history. If you don't know anything about Frederick Douglass, he was born enslaved and taught himself how to read. Like, unless I am mistaken, and I didn't remember the 35 hours of content that I listened to, he was like so intelligent that he wound up being sent to live as the companion to a boy around his age. And while he was living in Baltimore, after his younger years living on a plantation in Maryland, and then he was sent off to be the companion to this boy, and he, like, using the Bible, using papers that he just kind of found, like, just learned how to read. I work as a teacher. That is actually so impressive. Reading is not intuitive at all, so it's very impressive that he was able to become as educated as he wound up being in his life. I listened to the audiobook. I would recommend this as an audiobook. You might be able to read it a little faster just because anytime someone's reading out something to you, it's going to take longer. But if you have like an hour commute or an hour at any point multiple times during a week, I would be listening to it in like hour chunks, coming home after work or going to get groceries or something, doing some errand that would take an hour. Each chapter was about an hour, somewhere a little more, somewhere a little less, but I do think it's worth the listen. It's going to make every book you listen to or engage with feel so short. And it's super well written, very interesting. He had such a fascinating life, so many parallels between his time period and now, so many parallels in terms of like social justice movements, like the type of squabbling that was happening in the late 1800s about Frederick Douglass. Like, there's a part where people were mad that there was a fundraising effort to purchase Frederick Douglass's freedom because he escaped. He was technically still a fugitive even though he escaped. So someone could come and capture him and bring him back to the people who owned him, who claimed that he was their property, because up until those laws were abolished, you could just go and capture a fugitive slave and bring them back. So there was an effort, as he was becoming more prominent, for people to raise money to buy his freedom outright so he didn't have to worry about being captured or encountering people who wanted to make a profit off of him or silence him. And people were literally mad that people were trying to do this thing to protect him because they were so, I think it was like called moral puritanism of we can't give any money to these people, which is just like, sure, but the point is we want to be able to ensure that Frederick Douglass is safe. So it's just so interesting. You see the same kind of arguments nowadays with people online in social justice spaces. So it's just like, wow, humans really don't change. Obviously, there's a lot of parallels with like the Fugitive Slave Act and ICE just taking people on the street, you know. I took so many notes. I knew nothing of this subject before, and I know so much now. If you like nonfiction, I know it's long, but I do think this is something you would probably enjoy. Okay, the last book, Heaven and Hell, A History of the Afterlife. This I started around the same time as Frederick Douglass, and I took a longer break from reading it because it just got really in the weeds of like Bible stuff. And I grew up Catholic. We never read the Bible. Like the priest would read it to you. They read like 3 different parts every mass. So it's like, I got the gist, you know, and apparently they'll take a whole year to go through like the whole Bible. So you get like, if you're going for a calendar, you're getting like the basic gist of everything. But yeah, I never grew up like with a literal interpretation of the Bible or around really, really religious people. So it has been interesting as an adult to kind of come to the realization that a lot of America and a lot of Americans really grow up with this idea of hell and heaven, and this idea that the Bible totally supports the concept of hell. It was so interesting to, one, as an adult, learn that people really grow up in that environment. And then also that when you take a historical perspective of, I think Bart D. Ehrman is a biblical historian, I believe. And when you take that historical approach, there isn't really a lot of evidence. Bart Ehrman lays it out in the book, but basically using what is considered best practices in history or in historical Bible studies, and from what we know of when each gospel was written and who we think wrote each section, because some sections are claimed to be written by people who didn't actually write them. Bart Ehrman explains how we know that and why we know that, and kind of the thought process and the logic that leads historians to believe that. So it was really interesting to be walked through his argument. I'm not going to be able to say it for you here. If you're interested, I would really recommend this book. The third was very interesting to me personally because he talks a lot about what Greek conceptions of and pre-Christian conceptions of the afterlife were. That's kind of important to his argument because one of the arguments is that the culture in which the Bible was written and being read contributed a lot to people's understanding of the afterlife and kind of illustrated the concepts that were being talked about in the Bible. So even though the Bible didn't explicitly say there is an actual place, hell, where you will actually be in fire, he kind of explains why people might have begun to think that using these concepts of the afterlife that existed before Christianity, and how humans kind of innate desire for justice as a concept also really fuels people wanting it to be a reality. I followed the arguments, but I am not Christian. I grew up culturally Catholic, but like I was never super bought in. So I was following these arguments, but I don't think they were as impactful to me as they might be to someone who grew up like a true believing Christian and is no longer a Christian, or to someone who still is Christian and has interest in learning a historical perspective. If you're interested in theology, I think this would probably be a lot more impactful than it was to me. But it was cool. I liked learning about it. I liked that I did read it. I didn't enjoy like the last third of it I would say. The last 2/3. So I liked the first third. The second third was kind of The third I was pushing through, and then we got to the afterword where Ehrman really explains his own philosophy of what the afterlife is and his own views on spirituality, having studied the Bible historically. It was super cool for me because I'm like, oh my gosh, me and this super smart Bible historian are on the same team. He's like a humanist. So yeah, that's always kind of cool when smart people who know a lot of things reveal themselves to have similar beliefs to you. Feels kind of validating in a nice way. But yeah, that was everything I read in Q1. I filmed for so long. I wrote notes, but I don't think I'm good at talking. I just go off in so many different ways. My throat is sore. I need to take a shower. I have work tomorrow. I hope you liked hearing about these books. If you have any questions, let me know. Do you want summaries of the books? Would that be helpful? Should I include summaries? Because I kind of skipped the summaries at this point. But hopefully it was fun for you to hear about these books. And if not, I'm surprised that you're still watching this video. But thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, goodbye.